the Jesus Revelation Symphony. This is a glimpse into the magnificent and beautiful life Jesus lived on our planet. Of all human knowledge, that which is of greatest value is to know the religious life of Jesus and how he lived it. Let your spirit soar as you hear Jesus' Revelation Symphony revealed anew through epochal revelation, affirming that you are a son or daughter of God, our Father in heaven, and that all mortals are brothers and sisters. Through our becoming one with our divine spirits, we will be in harmony with each other, and through the fruits of the Spirit we bear, we can recreate the beautiful music of Jesus' symphony in our life in the 21st century. This is a special announcement coming to you from the Universe Administration. Our beloved Sovereign has been born as a babe in the village of Bethlehem in Palestine on earth. To average Jewish parents he's been born. Joseph and Mary are their names. Joshua ben Joseph, the little Jewish baby, conceived and born just as all babies before and since. But this baby is the incarnation of the beloved creator of this universe of things and beings. He was a union of the two natures, the human and the divine. One evening about sundown, before Joseph had returned home, Gabriel appeared to Mary by the side of a low stone table, and after she had recovered her composure, said, "I come at the bidding of one who is my master, and whom you shall love and nurture. To you, Mary, I bring glad tidings when I announce that the conception within you is ordained by heaven, and that in due time you will become the mother of a son. You shall call him Joshua, and he shall inaugurate the kingdom of heaven on earth and among men. Speak not of this matter save to Joseph and to Elizabeth your kinswoman, to whom I have also appeared, and who shall presently also bear a son, whose name shall be John, and who will prepare the way for the message of deliverance, which your son shall proclaim to men with great power and deep conviction. And doubt not my word, Mary, for this home has been chosen as the mortal habitat of the child of destiny. My benediction rests upon you, the power of the Most Highs will strengthen you, and the Lord of all the earth shall overshadow you." Joseph did not become reconciled to the idea that Mary was to become the mother of an extraordinary child until after he had experienced a very impressive dream. In this dream, a brilliant celestial messenger appeared to him and, among other things, said, "Joseph, I appear by command of him who now reigns on high, and I am directed to instruct you concerning the Son whom Mary shall bear, and who shall become a great light in the world. In him will be life, and his life shall become the light of mankind. He shall first come to his own people, but they will hardly receive him. But to as many as shall receive him, to them will he reveal that they are the children of God." After this experience, Joseph never again wholly doubted Mary's story of Gabriel's visit and of the promise that the unborn child was to become a divine messenger to the world. In the month of March, 8 BC, the month Joseph and Mary were married, Caesar Augustus decreed that all inhabitants of the Roman Empire should be numbered, that a census should be made which could be used for effecting better taxation. Throughout all the Roman Empire, this census was registered in the year 8 BC, except in the Palestinian kingdom of Herod, where it was taken in 7 BC, 1 year later. It was not necessary that Mary should go to Bethlehem for enrollment. Joseph was authorized to register for his family. But Mary, being an adventurous and aggressive person, insisted on accompanying him. She feared being left alone lest a child be born while Joseph was away, and again, Bethlehem being not far from the city of Judah, Mary foresaw a possible pleasurable visit with her kinswoman Elizabeth. Joseph and Mary were poor, and since they had only one beast of burden, Mary, being large with child, rode on the animal with the provisions while Joseph walked, leading the beast. The building and furnishing of a home had been a great drain on Joseph, since he had also to contribute to the support of his parents, as his father had been recently disabled. And so this Jewish couple went forth from their humble home early on the morning of August 18th, 7 BC, on their journey to Bethlehem. The first day of travel carried them around the foothills of Mount Gilboa, where they camped for the night by the river Jordan and engaged in many speculations as to what sort of a son would be born to them. Joseph adhered to the concept of a spiritual teacher, and Mary holding to the idea of a Jewish Messiah, a deliverer of the Hebrew nation. Bright and early the morning of August 19th, Joseph and Mary were again on their way. They partook of their noontime meal at the foot of Mount Sartaba, overlooking the Jordan Valley, and journeyed on, making Jericho for the night, where they stopped at an inn on the highway in the outskirts of the city. Early in the morning of August 20th, they resumed their journey, reaching Jerusalem before noon, visiting the temple, and going on to their destination, arriving at Bethlehem in mid-afternoon. The inn was overcrowded, and Joseph accordingly sought lodgings with distant relatives, but every room in Bethlehem was filled to overflowing. On returning to the courtyard at the inn, he was informed that the caravan stables, hewn out of the side of the rock and situated just below the inn, had been cleared of animals and cleaned up for the reception of lodgers. Leaving the donkey in the courtyard, Joseph shouldered their bags of clothing and provisions, and with Mary descended the stone steps to their lodgings below. They found themselves located in what had been a grain storage room to the front of the stalls and mangers. Tent curtains had been hung, and they counted themselves fortunate to have such comfortable quarters. Joseph had thought to go out at once and enroll, but Mary was weary. She was considerably distressed and besought him to remain by her side, which he did. All that night Mary was restless, so that neither of them slept much. By the break of day the pangs of childbirth were well in evidence, and at noon, August 21st, 7 BC, with the help and kind ministrations of women fellow travelers, Mary was delivered of a male child. Jesus of Nazareth was born into the world, was wrapped in the clothes which Mary had brought along for such a possible contingency, and laid in a nearby manger. When the time was right, Joseph and Mary went up to the temple at Jerusalem in person to present Jesus to the priests and effect his redemption, and also to make the proper sacrifice to ensure Mary's ceremonial purification from the alleged uncleanliness of childbirth. There lingered constantly about the courts of the temple two remarkable characters, Simeon, a singer, and Anna, a poetess. Both were intimates of the priest Zacharias, who had confided the secret of John and Jesus to them. Both Simeon and Anna longed for the coming of the Messiah, and their confidence in Zacharias led them to believe that Jesus was the expected deliverer of the Jewish people. Zacharias knew the day Joseph and Mary were expected to appear at the temple with Jesus, and he had prearranged with Simeon and Anna to indicate by the salute of his upraised hand which one in the procession of firstborn children was Jesus. For this occasion, Anna had written a poem which Simeon proceeded to sing, much to the astonishment of Joseph and Mary and all who were assembled in the temple courts. And the hymn Simeon sang ended with these words: "Yes, and you, child of promise, shall be called the prophet of the Most High, for you shall go before the face of the Lord to establish his kingdom, to give knowledge of salvation to his people in the remission of their sins. Rejoice in the tender mercy of our God, because the day spring from on high has now visited us, to shine upon those who sit in darkness and the shadow of death, to guide our feet into ways of peace. And now let your servant depart in peace, O Lord, according to your word, for my eyes have seen your salvation, which you have prepared before the face of all peoples, a light for even the unveiling of the Gentiles, and the glory of your people Israel." When, after more than a year of searching, Herod's spies had not located Jesus, and because of the suspicion that the babe was still concealed in Bethlehem, he prepared an order directing that a systematic search be made of every house in Bethlehem. Zacharias dispatched a messenger to Joseph, and the night before, Joseph and Mary departed from Bethlehem with the babe for Alexandria in Egypt. In order to avoid attracting attention, they journeyed alone to Egypt with Jesus. They went to Alexandria on funds provided by Zacharias, and there Joseph worked at his trade, while Mary and Jesus lodged with well-to-do relatives of Joseph's family. They sojourned in Alexandria 2 full years, not returning to Bethlehem until after the death of Herod. In the early morning hours of April 2nd, 3 BC, Jesus was thrilled by the thought of having a baby brother, and he would stand around by the hour just to observe the baby James's early activities. Mary taught Jesus to know and care for the vines and flowers growing about the garden walls, which completely surrounded the home plot. She also provided on the roof of the house, the summer bedroom, shallow boxes of sand in which Jesus worked out maps and did much of his early practice of writing Aramaic, Greek, and later on Hebrew, for in time he learned to read, write, and speak fluently all 3 languages. It was therefore the custom for Joseph to take Jesus out for walks on Sabbath afternoons, one of their favorite jaunts being to climb the high hill near their home, from which they could obtain a panoramic view of all Galilee. To the northwest, on clear days, they could see the long ridge of Mount Carmel running down to the sea, and many times Jesus heard his father relate the story of Elijah, one of the first of that long line of Hebrew prophets who reproved Ahab and exposed the priests of Baal of his faithfulness and eventual translation. To the north, Mount Hermon raised its snowy peak in majestic splendor and monopolized the skyline, almost 3,000 feet of the upper slopes glistening white with perpetual snow. Far to the east, they could discern the Jordan Valley, and far beyond, the rocky hills of Moab. Also to the south and the east, when the sun shone upon their marble walls, they could see the Greco-Roman cities of the Decapolis with their amphitheaters and pretentious temples. And when they lingered towards the going down of the sun, to the west they could make out the sailing vessels on the distant Mediterranean. From 4 directions, Jesus could observe the caravan trains as they wended their way in and out of Nazareth, and to the south he could overlook the broad and fertile plain country stretching off towards Mount Gilboa and Samaria. When they did not climb the heights to view the distant landscape, they strolled through the countryside and studied nature in her various moods in accordance with the seasons. Jesus' earliest training, aside from that of the home hearth, had to do with a reverent and sympathetic contact with nature. Jesus is about 12 years of age. Jesus is thinking about how he can carry out his obligations to his family and at the same time be obedient to the call of his mission to the world. Throughout this and the 2 following years, Jesus suffered great mental distress as the result of his constant effort to adjust his personal views of religious practices and social amenities to the established beliefs of his parents. His supreme conflict was between 2 great commands, which were uppermost in his youthful mind. The one was, be loyal to the dictates of your highest convictions of truth and righteousness. The other was, honor your father and mother, for they have given you life and the nurture thereof. However, he never shirked the responsibility of making the necessary daily adjustments between these realms of loyalty to one's personal convictions and duty towards one's family. And he achieved the satisfaction of effecting an increasingly harmonious blending of personal convictions and family obligations into a masterful concept of group solidarity based upon loyalty, fairness, tolerance, and love. It was nighttime, and Jesus was 13 years of age. On the day before the Passover Sabbath, flood tides of spiritual illumination swept through the mortal mind of Jesus and filled his human heart to overflowing with affectionate pity for the spiritually blind and morally ignorant multitudes assembled for the celebration of the ancient Passover commemoration. This was one of the most extraordinary days that the Son of God spent in the flesh, and during the night, for the first time in his earth career, there appeared to him an assigned messenger from Salvington, commissioned by Emmanuel, who said, "The hour has come. It is time that you begin to be about your Father's business." And so there now arrived the celestial messenger to remind this lad, not quite 13 years of age, that the hour had come to begin the resumption of the responsibilities of a universe. This was the first act of a long succession of events which finally culminated in the completion of the Son's bestowal on earth, URANTIA, and the replacing of the government of a universe on his human, divine shoulders. 5 Nazareth families were guests of or associates with the family of Simon of Bethany in the celebration of the Passover, Simon having purchased the paschal lamb for the company. It was the slaughter of these lambs in such enormous numbers that had so affected Jesus on his temple visit. It had been the plan to eat the Passover with Mary's relatives, but Jesus persuaded his parents to accept the invitation to go to Bethany. That night they assembled for the Passover rites, eating the roasted flesh with unleavened bread and bitter herbs. Jesus, being a new son of the covenant, was asked to recount the origin of the Passover, and this he well did, but he somewhat disconcerted his parents by the inclusion of numerous remarks mildly reflecting the impressions made on his youthful but thoughtful mind by the things which he had so recently seen and heard. This was the beginning of the 7-day ceremonies of the Feast of the Passover. Even at this early date, though he said nothing about such matters to his parents, Jesus had begun to turn over in his mind the propriety of celebrating the Passover without the slaughtered lamb. He felt assured in his own mind that the Father in heaven was not pleased with this spectacle of sacrificial offerings, and as the years passed, he became increasingly determined someday to establish the celebration of a bloodless Passover. This is the calendar year of his 14th birthday. He had become a good yoke maker and worked well with both canvas and leather. He was also rapidly developing into an expert carpenter and cabinet maker. This summer he made frequent trips to the top of the hill to the northwest of Nazareth for prayer and meditation. He was gradually becoming more self-conscious of the nature of his bestowal on earth. Jesus went through the sudden death of his father in a construction site accident when just 14 years of age, and became the father of the family, even rearing baby Ruth, who was born after Joseph's death. He continued to carry on his advanced courses of reading under the synagogue teachers, and he also continued with the home education of his brothers, James, Joseph, Simon, Jude, and Amos, and sisters, Miriam, Martha, and Ruth, as they grew up to suitable ages. Sadly, Amos died from a high fever when 5 years of age. Jesus is 19 years of age. Although Jesus was poor, his social standing in Nazareth was in no way impaired. He was one of the foremost young men of the city and very highly regarded by most of the young women. Since Jesus was such a splendid specimen of robust and intellectual manhood, and considering his reputation as a spiritual leader, it was not strange that Rebekah, the eldest daughter of Ezra, a wealthy merchant and trader of Nazareth, should discover that she was slowly falling in love with this son of Joseph. She first confided her affection to Miriam, Jesus' sister, and Miriam in turn talked all this over with her mother. Mary was intensely aroused. Was she about to lose her son, now become the indispensable head of the family? Would troubles never cease? What next could happen? And then she paused to contemplate what effect marriage would have upon Jesus' future career. Not often, but at least sometimes, did she recall the fact that Jesus was a child of promise. After she and Miriam had talked this matter over, they decided to make an effort to stop it before Jesus learned about it by going direct to Rebekah, laying the whole story before her, and honestly telling her about their belief that Jesus was a son of destiny, that he was to become a great religious leader, perhaps the Messiah. Rebekah listened intently. She was thrilled with the recital and more than ever determined to cast her lot with this man of her choice and to share his career of leadership. She argued to herself that such a man would all the more need a faithful and efficient wife. She interpreted Mary's efforts to dissuade her as a natural reaction to the dread of losing the head and sole support of her family, but knowing that her father approved of her attraction for the carpenter's son, she rightly reckoned that he would gladly supply the family with sufficient income fully to compensate for the loss of Jesus' earnings. She made bold to go directly to Jesus. This she did with the cooperation of her father, who invited Jesus to their home for the celebration of Rebekah's 17th birthday. Jesus listened attentively and sympathetically to the recital of these things, first by the father, then by Rebekah herself. He made kindly reply to the effect that no amount of money could take the place of his obligation personally to rear his father's family, to fulfill the most sacred of all human trusts, loyalty to one's own flesh and blood. Rebekah's father was deeply touched by Jesus' words of family devotion and retired from the conference. Then began the eventful talk with Rebekah. Thus far in his life, Jesus had made little distinction in his association with boys and girls, with young men and young women. His mind had been altogether too much occupied with the pressing problems of practical earthly affairs and the intriguing contemplation of his eventual career about his father's business, ever to have given serious consideration to the consummation of personal love in human marriage. But now he was face to face with another of those problems which every average human being must confront and decide. Indeed, was he tested in all points, like as you are. After listening attentively, he sincerely thanked Rebekah for her expressed admiration, adding, "It shall cheer and comfort me all the days of my life." He explained that he was not free to enter into relations with any woman other than those of simple brotherly regard and pure friendship. He made it clear that his first and paramount duty was the rearing of his father's family, that he could not consider marriage until that was accomplished. And then he added, "If I am a son of destiny, I must not assume obligations of lifelong duration until such a time as my destiny shall be made manifest." Rebekah was heartbroken. She refused to be comforted and importuned her father to leave Nazareth until he finally consented to move to Sepphoris. In after years, to the many men who sought her hand in marriage, Rebekah had but one answer. She lived for only one purpose, to await the hour when this, to her, the greatest man who ever lived, would begin his career as a teacher of living truth. And she followed him devotedly through his eventful years of public labor, being present, unobserved by Jesus, that day when he rode triumphantly into Jerusalem. And she stood among the other women by the side of Mary on that fateful and tragic afternoon when the Son of Man hung upon the cross. To her, as well as to countless worlds on high, the one altogether lovely, and the greatest among 10,000. Jesus took care of his family until he was 27 years of age. Then he traveled and worked at various occupations for about 5 years. He spent much time gaining an intimate knowledge of all races and classes of men. In each of these numerous human contacts, Jesus had a double purpose. He desired to learn their reactions to the life they were living in the flesh, and he was also minded to say or do something to make that life richer and more worthwhile. Always the burden of his message was the fact of the Heavenly Father's love and the truth of his mercy, coupled with the good news that man is a faith son of this same God of love. He had contact with over 500 people during this time. Jesus was 29 years of age. Before the end of Passover week, Jesus met a wealthy traveler and his son from India. They were on their way to Rome and various points on the Mediterranean. They came to Jerusalem during Passover, hoping to find someone whom they could engage as interpreter for both and tutor for the son. The father was insistent that Jesus consent to travel with them. Jesus told him about his family, and the traveler proposed to advance to Jesus the wages of 1 year. One night, the father asked Jesus about Buddhism. After Jesus' response, Gained said, "Teacher, let you and I make a new religion, one good enough for India, big enough for Rome, and maybe we can trade it to the Jews for Yahweh." And Jesus replied, "Gained, the religions of men grow up over long periods of time, while the revelations of God flash upon earth in the lives of the men who reveal God to their fellows." That night, after they retired, Gained could not sleep. He talked a long time with his father and finally said, "You know, Father, I sometimes think Joshua is a prophet." What a scene for the celestial intelligences to behold. What a scene, what a scene. An Indian lad proposing to the creator of a universe that they make a new religion. And it happened. That which the enlightened and reflective human imagination of spiritual teaching and leading wholeheartedly and unselfishly wants to do and be becomes measurably creative in accordance with the degree of mortal dedication to the divine doing of the Father's will. When man goes in partnership with God, great things may and do happen. Baptism and the 40 days. Being engrossed with the details of rapidly baptizing such a large number of converts, John did not look up to see Jesus until the Son of Man stood in his immediate presence. When John recognized Jesus, the ceremonies were halted for a moment while he greeted his cousin in the flesh and asked, "But why do you come down into the water to greet me?" And Jesus answered, "To be subject to your baptism." And John replied, "But I have need to be baptized by you. Why do you come to me?" And Jesus whispered to John, "Bear with me now, for it becomes us to set this example for my brothers standing here with me, and that the people may know that my hour has come." There was a tone of finality and authority in Jesus' voice. John was a-tremble with emotion as he made ready to baptize Jesus of Nazareth in the Jordan at noon on Monday, January 14th, A.D. Thus did John baptize Jesus and his two brothers, James and Jude. And when John had baptized these three, he dismissed the others for the day, announcing that he would resume baptisms at noon of the next day. As the people were departing, the four men, still standing in the water, heard a strange sound, and presently there appeared for a moment an apparition immediately over the head of Jesus, and they heard a voice saying, "This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased." Jesus looked up and prayed, "My Father who reigns in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come. Your will be done on earth, even as it is in heaven." And when he had prayed, the heavens were opened, and the Son of Man saw the vision of himself as a Son of God, as he was before he came to the earth in the likeness of mortal flesh, and as he would be when the incarnated life should be finished. A great change came over the countenance of Jesus, and coming up out of the water in silence, he took leave of them, going towards the hills to the east. And no man saw Jesus again for 40 days. John followed Jesus a sufficient distance to tell him the story of Gabriel's visit to his mother ere either had been born, as he had heard it so many times from his mother's lips. He allowed Jesus to continue on his way after he had said, "Now I know of a certainty that you are the deliverer." But Jesus made no reply. When John returned to his disciples, he now had some 25 or 30 who abode with him constantly. He found them in earnest conference, discussing what had just happened in connection with Jesus' baptism. They were all the more astonished when John now made known to them the story of the Gabriel visitation to Mary before Jesus was born, and also that Jesus spoke no word to him even after he had told him about this. There was no rain that evening, and this group of 30 or more talked long into the starlit night. They wondered where Jesus had gone and when they would see him again. Day by day up in the hills, Jesus formulated the plans for the remainder of his earth bestowal. On the last day of this memorable isolation, the Son of Man made his final decision. And this decision he communicated to his personalized spirit in these words, "And in all matters I pledge you I will be subject to the will of my Father." And when he had thus spoken, he journeyed down the mountain, and his face shone with the glory of spiritual victory and moral achievement. Early on Saturday morning, February 23rd, AD 26, Jesus came down from the hills to rejoin John's company encamped at Pella. During this Sabbath, 2 of John's leading disciples spent much time with Jesus. Of all John's followers, one named Andrew was the most profoundly impressed with Jesus. The two paused for a short talk, during which Andrew said, "I have observed you ever since you came to Capernaum, and I believe you are the new teacher. And though I do not understand all your teaching, I have fully made up my mind to follow you. I would sit at your feet and learn the whole truth about the new kingdom." And Jesus, with hearty assurance, welcomed Andrew as the first of his apostles, that group of 12 who were to labor with him in the work of establishing the new kingdom of God in the hearts of men. Soon after Jesus and Andrew returned to the camp, Andrew sought out his brother Simon and took him aside, informing him that he had settled in his own mind that Jesus was the great teacher and that he had pledged himself as a disciple. He went on to say that Jesus had accepted his proffer of service and suggested that he, Simon, likewise go to Jesus and offer himself for fellowship in the service of the new kingdom. Said Simon, "Ever since this man came to work in Zebedee's shop, I have believed he was sent by God." After Jesus had returned to Pella for the night, and while Andrew and Simon were yet discussing the nature of their service in the establishment of the forthcoming kingdom, James and John, the sons of Zebedee, arrived upon the scene, having just returned from their long and futile searching in the hills for Jesus. When they heard Simon Peter tell how he and his brother Andrew had become the first accepted counselors of the new kingdom, and that they were to leave with their new master on the morrow for Galilee, both James and John were sad. They had known Jesus for some time, and they loved him. Jesus was asleep when they reached his abode, but they awakened him, saying, "How is it that while we who have so long lived with you, are searching in the hills for you. You prefer others before us and choose Andrew and Simon as your first associates in the new kingdom. My brethren, you were already with me in the spirit of the kingdom, even before these others made requests to be received. You, my brethren, have no need to make requests for entrance into the kingdom. You have been with me in the kingdom from the beginning. Before men, others may take precedence over you, but in my heart did I also number you in the councils of the kingdom, even before you thought to make this request of me. Jesus and his 4 disciple apostles were well on their way towards Galilee. Before they crossed the Jordan to go by way of Nain to Nazareth, Jesus, looking ahead and up the road, saw one Philip of Bethsaida with a friend coming towards them. Jesus had known Philip aforetime, and he was also well known to all 4 of the new apostles. Peter took Philip to one side and proceeded to explain that they, referring to himself, Andrew, James, and John, had all become associates of Jesus in the new kingdom, and strongly urged Philip to volunteer for service. Philip was in a quandary. Teacher, shall I go down to John, or shall I join my friends who follow you? And Jesus answered, Follow me. Philip was thrilled with the assurance that he had found the deliverer. Philip now motioned to the group to remain where they were, while he hurried back to break the news of his decision to his friend Nathanael, who still tarried behind under the mulberry tree. Philip led Nathanael to Jesus, who looked benignly into the face of the sincere doubter, said, Behold, a genuine Israelite, in whom there is no deceit. Follow me. And Nathanael turned to Philip, said, You are right. He is indeed a master of men. I will also follow, if I am worthy. And Jesus nodded to Nathanael, again saying, Follow me. Jesus had now assembled 1/2 of his future core of intimate associates, 5 who had for some time known him, and 1 stranger, Nathanael. On Sabbath, June 22nd, shortly before they went out on their first preaching tour, and about 10 days after John's imprisonment, Jesus occupied the synagogue pulpit for the 2nd time since bringing his apostles to Capernaum. Jesus said, I have come to proclaim the establishment of the Father's kingdom, and this kingdom shall include the worshiping souls of Jew and Gentile, rich and poor, free and bond, for my Father is no respecter of persons. His love and his mercy are over all. The Father in heaven sends his Spirit to indwell the minds of men, and when I shall have finished my work on earth, likewise shall the Spirit of truth be poured out upon all flesh. And the Spirit of my Father and the Spirit of truth shall establish you in the coming kingdom of spiritual understanding and divine righteousness. My kingdom is not of this world. The Son of Man will not lead forth armies in battle for the establishment of a throne of power or a kingdom of worldly glory. When my kingdom shall have come, you shall know the Son of Man as the Prince of Peace, the revelation of the everlasting Father. The children of this world fight for the establishment and enlargement of the kingdoms of this world, but my disciples shall enter the kingdom of heaven by their moral decisions and by their spirit victories. And when they once enter therein, they shall find joy, righteousness, and eternal life. Those who first seek to enter the kingdom, thus beginning to strive for a nobility of character like that of my Father, shall presently possess all else that is needful. Before they began this first 2 weeks of service, Jesus announced to them that he desired to ordain 12 apostles to continue the work of the kingdom after his departure, and authorized each of them to choose 1 man from among his early converts for membership in the projected corps of apostles. The newly selected apostles were Matthew Levi, Thomas Didymus, James Alphaeus, Judas Alphaeus, Simon Zelotes, and Judas Iscariot. The next week was devoted to a program of intense training. Each day the 6 new apostles were put in the hands of their respective nominators for a thoroughgoing review of all they had learned and experienced in preparation for the work of the kingdom. The older apostles carefully reviewed, for the benefit of the younger 6, Jesus' teachings up to that hour. Evenings they all assembled in Zebedee's garden to receive Jesus' instruction. It was at this time that Jesus established the mid-week holiday for rest and recreation, and they pursued this plan of relaxation for 1 day each week throughout the remainder of his material life. The Ordination of 12 Apostles. Just before noon on Sunday, January 12th, AD 27, Jesus called the apostles together for their ordination as public preachers of the gospel of the kingdom. The 12 were expecting to be called almost any day, so this morning they did not go out far from the shore to fish. Several of them were lingering near the shore, repairing their nets and tinkering with their fishing paraphernalia. As Jesus started down the seashore calling the apostles, he first hailed Andrew and Peter, who were fishing near the shore. Next he signaled to James and John, who were in the boat nearby visiting with their father Zebedee and mending their nets. 2 by 2 he gathered up the other apostles, and when he had assembled all 12, he journeyed with them to the highlands north of Capernaum, where he proceeded to instruct them in preparation for their formal ordination. They were going apart with the Master to participate in some sort of solemn ceremony of personal consecration and collective dedication to the sacred work of representing their Master in the proclamation of the coming of his Father's kingdom. Before the formal ordination service, Jesus spoke to the 12 as they were seated about him. "My brethren, this hour of the kingdom has come. I have brought you apart here with me to present you to the Father as ambassadors of the kingdom. The new kingdom which my Father is about to set up in the hearts of his earth children is to be an everlasting dominion. There shall be no end of this rule of my Father in the hearts of those who desire to do his divine will. I declare to you that my Father is not the God of Jew or Gentile. Many shall come from the east and from the west to sit down with us in the Father's kingdom." And many other things he shared with them. The power of this kingdom shall consist not in the strength of armies, nor in the might of riches, but rather in the glory of the divine Spirit that shall come to teach the minds and rule the hearts of the reborn citizens of this heavenly kingdom, the sons of God. This is the brotherhood of love, wherein righteousness reigns, and whose battle cry shall be peace on earth and goodwill to all men. This kingdom which you are so soon to go forth proclaiming is the desire of the good men of all ages, the hope of all the earth, and the fulfillment of the wise promises of all the prophets. And he shared other things, and then said, "And this shall your eyes now behold, this small beginning of 12 commonplace men shall multiply and grow until eventually the whole earth shall be filled with the praise of my Father. And it will not be so much by the words you speak as by the lives you live that men will know you have been with me and have learned of the realities of the kingdom. And while I would lay no grievous burdens upon your minds, I am about to put upon your souls the solemn responsibility of representing me in the world when I shall presently leave you, as I now represent my Father in this life which I am living in the flesh." And when he had finished speaking, he stood up. The Ordination. Jesus now instructed the 12 mortals who had just listened to his declaration concerning the kingdom to kneel in a circle about him. Then the Master placed his hands upon the head of each apostle, beginning with Judas Iscariot and ending with Andrew. When he had blessed them, he extended his hands and prayed. "My Father, I now bring to you these men, my messengers. From among our children on earth I have chosen these 12 to go forth to represent me as I came forth to represent you. Love them and be with them as you have loved and been with me. And now, my Father, give these men wisdom as I place all the affairs of the coming kingdom in their hands. And I would, if it is your will, tarry on earth a time to help them in their labors for the kingdom. And again, my Father, I thank you for these men, and I commit them to your keeping while I go on to finish the work you have given me to do." When Jesus had finished praying, the apostles remained, each man bowed in his place, and it was many minutes before even Peter dared lift up his eyes to look upon the Master. One by one they embraced Jesus, but no man said aught. A great silence pervaded the place, while a host of celestial beings looked down upon this solemn and sacred scene, the Creator of a universe placing the affairs of the divine brotherhood of man under the direction of human minds. Then Jesus spoke, saying, "Now that you are ambassadors of my Father's kingdom, you have thereby become a class of men separate and distinct from all other men on earth. You are not now as men among men, but as the enlightened citizens of another and heavenly country among the ignorant creatures of this dark world. It is not enough that you live as you were before this hour, but henceforth must you live as those who have tasted the glories of a better life and have been sent back to earth as ambassadors of the sovereign of that new and better world. Of the teacher, more is expected than the pupil. Of the master, more is expected than of the servant. Of the citizens of the heavenly kingdom, more is required than of the citizens of the earthly rule." And Jesus went on to instruct them. "You are commissioned to save men, not to judge them. At the end of your earth life, you will all expect mercy. Therefore do I require of you during your mortal life that you show mercy to all of your brethren in the flesh." And many more things Jesus said to them. "I send you forth to proclaim liberty to the spiritual captives, joy to those in bondage of fear. Heal the sick in accordance with my Father's will. Discern truth clearly. Live the righteous life fearlessly, and so shall you be my apostles and the Father's ambassadors. You and your successors courage and bravery will show. Proclaim to all the world the good news, the fatherhood of God and the brotherhood of men." Never before had the apostles heard Jesus speak in this way, for he had talked to them as one having supreme authority. They came down from the mountain about sundown, but no man asked Jesus a question. And so I give you this new commandment, that you love one another, even as I have loved you. And by this will all men know that you are my disciples, if you thus love one another. To share my love means that you have shared in my service. The affectionate dedication of the human will to the doing of the Father's will is man's choicest gift to God. And he who surrenders to the will of my Father shall abide forever and receive eternal life. Never forget, there is only one adventure which is more satisfying and thrilling than the attempt to discover the will of the living God, and that is the supreme experience of honestly trying to do that divine will. Let your religion become the fact of real experience, which testifies that God has found you, idealized, ennobled, and spiritualized you, and that you have enlisted in the eternal adventure of finding the God who has thus found and sonshiped you. The Father has sent His Spirit to indwell your human mind. They bring with them the model career, the ideal lives as determined and foreordained by the Father. Survival is a gift of God which must be desired by the mortals of time. Prayer is the breath of the soul and should lead you to be persistent in your attempt to ascertain the Father's will. Ask, and it shall be given you. Seek, and you shall find. Knock, and it shall be opened to you. For everyone who asks receives. He who seeks finds, and to him who knocks the door of salvation will be opened. Persist in praying, not to win favor with God, but to change your earth attitude and to enlarge your soul capacity for spirit receptivity. Prayer elevates man because it is a technique of progressing by the utilization of the ascending spiritual currents of the universe. Even when the air currents are ascending, no bird can soar except by outstretched wings. Jesus taught that when they had made their prayers to the Father, they should remain for a time in silent receptivity to afford the indwelling Spirit the better opportunity to speak to the listening soul. God answers man's prayer by giving him an increased revelation of truth, an enhanced appreciation of beauty, and an augmented concept of goodness. It is the most potent spiritual growth stimulus. Pray always, and have faith, living faith. Salvation is the free gift of God, but those who are born of the Spirit will immediately begin to show forth the fruits of the Spirit in loving service to their fellow mortals. Someday, the gospel of the kingdom will be better understood when it is presented in terms expressive of the family relationship, the teaching of the fatherhood of God and the brotherhood of man, sonship with God. Then the Master discoursed at some length on the earthly family as an illustration of the heavenly family. Love of family would invariably manifest itself in unselfish and loving social service. Marriage with children and consequent family life is stimulative of the highest potentials of human nature and simultaneously provides the ideal avenue for the expression of these quickened attributes of mortal personality. The disciples early learned that the Master had a profound respect and sympathetic regard for every human being he met, and they were tremendously impressed by this uniform and unvarying consideration which he so consistently gave to all sorts of men, women, and children. He would pause in the midst of a profound discourse that he might go out in the road to speak good cheer to a passing woman laden with her burden of body and soul. He would interrupt a serious conference with his apostles to fraternize with an intruding child. Nothing ever seemed so important to Jesus as the individual human who chanced to be in his immediate presence. He was master and teacher, but he was more. He was also a friend and a neighbor, an understanding comrade. Though Jesus' public teaching mainly consisted in parables and short discourses, he invariably taught his apostles by questions and answers. He would always pause to answer sincere questions during his later public discourses. The apostles were at first shocked by, but early became accustomed to Jesus' treatment of women. He made it very clear to them that women were to be accorded equal rights with men in the kingdom. Of all the daring things which Jesus did in connection with his earth career, the most amazing was his sudden announcement on the evening of January 16th, 29 AD. On the morrow we will set apart 10 women for the ministering work of the kingdom. Jesus earlier had requested David Zebedee to dispatch messengers calling to Bethsaida 10 devout women who had served in the administration of the former encampment and the tented infirmary. These women had all listened to the instruction given the young evangelists, but it had never occurred to either themselves or their teachers that Jesus would dare to commission women to teach the gospel of the kingdom and minister to the sick. It was at Magdala that the women first demonstrated their usefulness and vindicated the wisdom of their choosing. Andrew had imposed rather strict rules upon his associates about doing personal work with women, especially with those of questionable character. When the party entered Magdala, these 10 women evangelists were free to enter the evil resorts and preach the glad tidings directly to all their inmates. And when visiting the sick, these women were able to draw very close in their ministry to their afflicted sisters. As a result of the ministry of these 10 women, afterward known as the 12 women, Mary Magdalene was won for the kingdom. Through a succession of misfortunes, this woman had found herself in one of the nefarious resorts of Magdala. It was Martha and Rachel who made plain to Mary that the doors of the kingdom were open to even such as she. Mary believed the good news and was baptized by Peter the next day. Mary Magdalene became the most effective teacher of the gospel among this group of 12 women evangelists. She was set apart for such service, together with Rebecca, at Jotapata about 4 weeks subsequent to her conversion. This original group of 12 women soon trained a larger corps of 50 women in the work of home visitation and in the art of ministering to the sick and the afflicted. Perpetua, Simon Peter's wife, became a member of this new division of the women's corps and was entrusted with the leadership of the enlarged women's work under Abner. This new women's corps also had as members the wives of Philip and Matthew and the mother of James and John. In a day when women were not even allowed on the main floor of the synagogue, being confined to the women's gallery, and in the face of rabbinic teachings which declared that it was better that the words of the law should be burned than delivered to women, it was most astounding in that day to behold them being recognized as authorized teachers of the new gospel of the kingdom. The charge which Jesus gave these 10 women as he set them apart for gospel teaching and ministry was the Emancipation Proclamation, which set free all women and for all time. No more was man to look upon woman as his spiritual inferior. The whole country was stirred up by this proceeding, the enemies of Jesus making great capital out of this move, but everywhere the women believers in the good news stood staunchly behind their chosen sisters and voiced no uncertain approval of this tardy acknowledgement of women's place in religious work. And this liberation of women, giving them due recognition, was practiced by the apostles immediately after the Master's departure, albeit they fell back to the olden customs in subsequent generations. When the Master and the 12 arrived at Jacob's well, Jesus, being weary from the journey, tarried by the well while Philip took the apostles with him to assist in bringing food and tents from Sychar, for they were disposed to stay in this vicinity for a while. Peter and the Zebedee sons would have remained with Jesus, but he requested that they go with their brethren. Jesus was thirsty, but there was no way of getting water from the well. When, therefore, a woman of Sychar came up with her water pitcher and prepared to draw from the well, Jesus said to her, "Give me a drink." This woman of Samaria knew Jesus was a Jew by his appearance and dress, and she surmised that he was a Galilean Jew from his accent. Her name was Nalda, and she was a comely creature. She was much surprised to have a Jewish man thus speak to her at the well and ask for water, for it was not deemed proper in those days for a self-respecting man to speak to a woman in public, much less for a Jew to converse with a Samaritan. Therefore Nalda asked Jesus, "How is it that you, being a Jew, ask for a drink of me, a Samaritan woman?" And Jesus answered, "I have indeed asked you for a drink, but if you could only understand, you would ask me for a draught of the living water." Then said Nalda, "But, sir, you have nothing to draw with, and the well is deep. Whence, then, have you this living water? Are you greater than our father Jacob, who gave us this well, and who drank thereof himself, and his sons, and his cattle also?" Jesus replied, "Everyone who drinks of this water will thirst again, but whosoever drinks of the water of the living Spirit shall never thirst, and this living water shall become in him a well of refreshment, springing up even to eternal life." Nalda then said, "Well, give me this water, that I thirst not, neither come all the way hither to draw. Besides, anything which a Samaritan woman could receive from such a commendable Jew would be a pleasure." Nalda did not know how to take Jesus' willingness to talk with her. She beheld in the Master's face the countenance of an upright and holy man, but she mistook friendliness for commonplace familiarity, and she misinterpreted his figure of speech as a form of making advances to her. And being a woman of lax morals, she was minded openly to become flirtatious, when Jesus, looking straight into her eyes, with a commanding voice said, "Woman, go get your husband and bring him hither." This command brought Nalda to her senses. She saw that she had misjudged the Master's kindness. She perceived that she had misconstrued his manner of speech. She was frightened. She began to realize that she stood in the presence of an unusual person, and groping about in her mind for a suitable reply, in great confusion she said, "But, sir, I cannot call my husband, for I have no husband." Then said Jesus, "You have spoken the truth, for while you may have once had a husband, he with whom you are now living is not your husband. Better it would be if you would cease to trifle with my words, and seek for the living water which I have this day offered you." By this time Nalda was sobered, and her better self was awake. She was not an immoral woman wholly by choice. She had been ruthlessly and unjustly cast aside by her husband, and in dire straits had consented to live with a certain Greek as his wife, but without marriage. Nalda now felt greatly ashamed that she had so unthinkingly spoken to Jesus, And she most penitently answered the master, saying, My Lord, I repent of my manner of speaking to you, for I perceive that you are a holy man, or maybe a prophet. And she was just about to seek direct and personal help from the master when she did what so many have done before and since, dodged the issue of personal salvation by turning to the discussion of theology and philosophy. Jesus perceived the attempt of the woman's soul to avoid direct and searching contact with its maker, but he also saw that there was present in her soul a desire to know the better way of life. After all, there was in Nalda's heart a true thirst for the living water. Therefore he dwelt patiently with her. Once more she resorted to questions of general religion, saying, Yes, I know, sir, that John has preached about the coming of the converter, he who will be called the deliverer, and that when he shall come, he will declare to us all things. And Jesus interrupted Nalda and said with a startling assurance, I who speak to you am he. This was the first direct, positive, and undisguised pronouncement of his divine nature and sonship which Jesus had made on earth, and it was made to a woman, and a woman of questionable character in the eyes of men up to this moment, but a woman whom the divine eye beheld as having been sinned against more than as sinning of her own desire, and now being a human soul who desired salvation, desired it sincerely and wholeheartedly, and that was enough. As Nalda was about to voice her real and personal longing for better things and a more noble way of living, just as she was ready to speak the real desire of her heart, the 12 apostles returned from Sychar, and coming upon this scene of Jesus talking so intimately with this woman, this Samaritan woman, and alone, they were more than astonished. They quickly deposited their supplies and drew aside, no man daring to reprove him, while Jesus said to Nalda, Woman, go your way. God has forgiven you. Henceforth you will live a new life. You have received the living water, and a new joy will spring up within your soul, and you shall become a daughter of the Most High. And the woman, perceiving the disapproval of the apostles, left her water pot and fled to the city. As she entered the city, she proclaimed to everyone she met, Go out to Jacob's well and go quickly, for there you will see a man who told me all I ever did. Can this be the converter? And ere the sun went down, a great crowd had assembled at Jacob's well to hear Jesus, and the Master talked to them more about the water of life, the gift of the indwelling Spirit. Jesus and the apostles were preparing to leave when scores of mothers came to where Jesus lodged, bringing their children in their arms and desiring that he bless the little ones. The apostles endeavored to send them away, but these women refused. Let the little children come to me, forbid them not, for of such is the kingdom of heaven. And he received all of the children, laying his hands on them while he spoke words of courage and hope to their mothers. And now Jesus would take his apostles along with him to Mount Hermon, where he had appointed to inaugurate his fourth phase of earth ministry as the Son of God. Jesus had been summoned to go up on the mountain apart by himself for the transaction of important matters having to do with the progress of his bestowal in the flesh, as this experience was related to the universe of his own creation. But who say you that I am? There was a moment of tense silence. The 12 never took their eyes off the Master, and then Simon Peter, springing to his feet, exclaimed, You are the deliverer, the Son of the living God. And the 11 sitting apostles arose to their feet with one accord, thereby indicating that Peter had spoken for all of them. When Jesus had beckoned them again to be seated, and while still standing before them, he said, "This has been revealed to you by my Father. You are my chosen ambassadors, but I know that in the circumstances you could not entertain this belief as a result of mere human knowledge. This is a revelation of the Spirit of my Father to your inmost souls. And when, therefore, you make this confession by the insight of the Spirit of my Father which dwells within you, I am led to declare that upon this foundation will I build the brotherhood of the kingdom of heaven. Upon this rock of spiritual reality will I build the living temple of spiritual fellowship in the eternal realities of my Father's kingdom. All the forces of evil and the hosts of sin shall not prevail against this human fraternity of the divine Spirit, and while my Father's Spirit shall ever be the divine guide and mentor of all who enter the bonds of this Spirit fellowship, to you and your successors I now deliver the keys of the outward kingdom, the authority over things temporal. The social and economic features of this association of men and women as fellows of the kingdom." In a general way, Jesus knew beforehand what was to transpire on the mountain, and he much desired that all his apostles might share this experience. It was to fit them for this revelation of himself that he tarried with them at the foot of the mountain, but they could not attain those spiritual levels which would justify their exposure to the full experience of the visitation of the celestial beings so soon to appear on earth. Since he could not take all of his associates with him, he decided to take only the 3 who were in the habit of accompanying him on such special vigils. Accordingly, only Peter, James, and John shared even a part of this unique experience with the Master. Early in the morning, Jesus and the 3 apostles began the ascent of Mount Hermon to receive the endowment which was to prepare him to enact the closing scenes of the drama of his bestowal on earth. When the 3 had been fast asleep for about half an hour, they were suddenly awakened by a nearby crackling sound, and much to their amazement and consternation, on looking about them, they beheld Jesus in intimate converse with 2 brilliant beings clothed in the habiliments of the light of the celestial world. And Jesus' face and form shone with the luminosity of a heavenly light. These 3 conversed in a strange language, but from certain things said, Peter erroneously conjectured that the beings with Jesus were Moses and Elijah. In reality, they were Gabriel and Father Melchizedek. The physical controllers had arranged for the apostles to witness this scene because of Jesus' request. The 3 apostles were so badly frightened that they were slow in collecting their wits. But Peter, who was first to recover himself, said as the dazzling vision faded from before them, and they observed Jesus standing alone, "Jesus, Master, it is good to have been here. We rejoice to see this glory. We are loath to go back down to the inglorious world. If you are willing, let us abide here, and we will erect 3 tents, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." And Peter said this because of his confusion, and because nothing else came into his mind at just that moment. While Peter was yet speaking, a silvery cloud drew near and overshadowed the 4 of them. The apostles now became greatly frightened, and as they fell down on their faces to worship, they heard a voice, the same that had spoken on the occasion of Jesus' baptism, say, "This is my beloved Son. Give heed to him." And when the cloud vanished, again was Jesus alone with the 3, and he reached down and touched them, saying, "Arise, and be not afraid. You shall see greater things than this." But the apostles were truly afraid. They were a silent and thoughtful trio as they made ready to descend the mountain shortly before midnight. It was Wednesday before Jesus' crucifixion. Jesus made ready to go into the hills alone, but the lad, John Mark, came forward with a basket of food and water and suggested that, if he intended to be away all day, he might find himself hungry. "I will stay by the basket when you go apart to pray," Jesus said. "Since with all your heart you crave to go with me, it shall not be denied you. We will go off and have a good visit." The Master spent this last day of quiet on earth visiting with this truth-hungry youth and talking with his paradise Father. This day has become known on high as the day which a young man spent with God in the hills. Forever, this occasion exemplifies the willingness of the Creator to fellowship mortals. Even a youth, if the desire of the heart is really supreme, can command the attention and enjoy the loving companionship of the God of the universe, actually experience the ecstasy of being alone with God in the hills. Jesus visited much with John, talking freely about the affairs of this world and the next. John told Jesus how much he regretted that he had not been old enough to be one of the apostles, and expressed his great appreciation that he had been permitted to follow on with them since their first preaching at the Jordan ford near Jericho, except for the trip to Phoenicia. Jesus warned the lad not to become discouraged by impending events and assured him he would live to become a mighty messenger of the kingdom. John Mark was thrilled by the memory of this day with Jesus in the hills, but he never forgot the Master's final admonition. "Well, John, we have had a good visit, a real day of rest, but see to it that you tell no man the things which I told you." And John Mark never did reveal anything that transpired on this day which he spent with Jesus in the hills. The Last Supper. After receiving the greetings of welcome extended by the father and mother of John Mark, the apostles went immediately to the upper chamber while Jesus lingered behind to talk with the Mark family. "I have greatly desired to eat this Passover with you. Take this cup and drink of it. This shall be the cup of my remembrance. Take this bread of remembrance and eat it. This bread of life is the united life of the Father and the Son in one gift. When you do these things, recall the life I have lived on earth among you, and rejoice that I am to continue to live on earth with you and to serve through you. Contend not among yourselves as to who shall be greatest. Be you all as brethren." The Remembrance Supper is the believer's symbolic rendezvous with the Creator. When you become thus Spirit conscious, the Son is actually present, and His Spirit fraternizes with the indwelling Spirit of His Father. Jesus continued to teach, saying, "When I have gone to the Father, and after He has fully accepted the work I have done for you on earth, and after I have received the final sovereignty of my own domain, I shall say to my Father, having left my children alone on earth, it is in accordance with my promise to send them another teacher. And when the Father shall approve, I will pour out the Spirit of truth upon all flesh. Already is my Father's Spirit in your hearts, and when this day shall come, you will also have me with you, even as you now have the Father. This new gift is the Spirit of living truth. The unbelievers will not at first listen to the teachings of this Spirit, but the sons of light will all receive Him gladly and with a whole heart. And you shall know the Spirit when he comes, even as you have known me. And you will receive this gift in your hearts, and he will abide with you. You thus perceive that I am not going to leave you without help and guidance. I will not leave you desolate. Today I can be with you only in person. In the times to come, I will be with you and all other men who desire my presence. Wherever you may be, and with each of you at the same time. Do you not discern that it is better for me to go away, that I leave you in the flesh, so that I may the better and the more fully be with you in the Spirit? In just a few hours the world will see me no more, but you will continue to know me in your hearts, even until I send you this new teacher, the Spirit of truth. As I have lived with you in person, then shall I live in you. I shall be one with your personal experience in the Spirit kingdom. I am telling you these things while I am still with you, that you may be the better prepared to endure those trials which are even now right upon us. And when this new day comes, you will be indwelt by the Son as well as the Father. And these gifts of heaven will ever work the one with the other, even as the Father and I have wrought on earth and before your very eyes as one person, the Son of Man. And this Spirit friend will bring to your remembrance everything I have taught you. My little children, I am going away, going back to my Father. In a little while you will not see me as you do here, as flesh and blood. In a very short time I am going to send you my Spirit, just like me, except for this material body. This new teacher is the Spirit of truth, who will live with each one of you in your hearts, and so will all the children of light be made one and be drawn toward one another. And in this very manner will my Father and I be able to live in the souls of each one of you, and also in the hearts of all other men who love us, and make that love real in their experiences by loving one another, even as I am now loving you. The new helper which Jesus promised to send into the hearts of believers to pour out upon all flesh is the Spirit of truth. This divine endowment is not the letter or the law of truth, neither is it to function as the form or expression of truth. The new teacher is the conviction of truth, the consciousness and assurance of true meanings on real spirit levels. And this new teacher is the Spirit of living and growing truth, expanding, unfolding, and adaptive truth. My Father, I came into this world to do your will, and so have I. I know that the hour has come to lay down this life in the flesh, and I do not shrink therefrom. But I would know that it is your will that I drink this cup. A mighty angel came down by his side, and speaking to him touched him and strengthened him. Behold the man. Again I declare to you that I find no crime in him, and having scourged him, I would release him. But the crowd shouted with one accord, "Crucify him." Jesus died royally as he had lived. He freely admitted his kingship and remained master of the situation throughout the tragic day. He went willingly to his death after he had provided for the safety of his chosen apostles. He started out to Golgotha bearing his own crossbeam and finished up his loving bestowal by handing over his spirit of mortal acquirement to the Paradise Father. After such a life and at such a death, the Master could truly say, "It is finished." After Mary Magdalene had tarried in the doorway of the tomb for a few moments, she saw that Jesus' body was gone, and in its place only the grave clothes, and she uttered a cry of alarm and anguish. Looking to one side and observing a silent and motionless stranger, Mary rushed towards him and addressed him as if she thought he might be the caretaker of the garden. She said, "Where have you taken the Master? Where have you laid him? Tell us that we may go and get him." When the stranger did not answer Mary, she began to weep. Then spoke Jesus to them, saying, "Whom do you seek?" "We seek for Jesus." "Mary." And when she heard that word of well-known sympathy and affectionate greeting, she knew it was the voice of the Master, and she rushed to kneel at his feet while she exclaimed, "My Lord and my Master." Two brothers, Cleopas and Jacob, trudged along the road to Emmaus. They talked in great earnestness about Jesus, his teachings, work, and about the rumors that his tomb was empty and the women had talked to him. They argued and debated. Jesus came alongside them as they journeyed on. Jesus said, "What were the words you exchanged so earnestly as I came upon you?" Said Cleopas, "Can it be that you sojourn in Jerusalem and know not the things which have recently happened?" Cleopas gives a summary of what had happened, and Jesus said, "When you tell me that it is about the teachings and work of this man, then may I enlighten you, since I am more than familiar with these teachings." And he taught them till they arrived home. They insisted that it was near nightfall and that he tarry with them. They sat down to eat and gave him the bread to bless. As he began to break and hand to them, their eyes were opened, and Cleopas recognized that their guest was the Master himself. And when he said, "It is the Master," Jesus vanished from their sight. And then they said, "No wonder our hearts burned within us as he spoke to us while we walked along the road and while he opened up to our understanding the Scriptures." They would not stop to eat. They had seen the Master. They rushed from the house, hastening back to Jerusalem to spread the good news of the risen Savior. About 9 that evening, these two excited brothers broke in upon the apostles to tell the news. The 16th appearance of Jesus after his resurrection occurred on Friday, May 5th, in the courtyard of Nicodemus, about 9 o'clock at night. On this evening, the Jerusalem believers had made their first attempt to get together since the resurrection. Assembled here at this time were the 11 apostles, the women's corps, and their associates, and about 50 other leading disciples of the Master, including a number of the Greeks. This company of believers had been visiting informally for more than half an hour, when suddenly Jesus appeared in full view and immediately began to instruct them. Said Jesus, "Peace be upon you." This is the most representative group of believers, apostles, and disciples, both men and women, to which I have appeared since the time of my deliverance from the flesh. I now call you to witness that I told you beforehand that my sojourn among you must come to an end. I told you that presently I must return to the Father, and then I plainly told you how the chief priests and the rulers of the Jews would deliver me up to be put to death, and that I would rise from the grave. Why then did you allow yourselves to become so disconcerted by all this when it came to pass? And why were you so surprised when I rose from the tomb on the 3rd day? You failed to believe me because you heard my words without comprehending the meaning thereof. And now you should give ear to my words, lest you again make the mistake of hearing my teachings with the mind, while in your hearts you fail to comprehend the meaning. From the beginning of my sojourn as one of you, I taught you that my one purpose was to reveal my Father in heaven to his children on earth. I have lived the God-revealing bestowal that you might experience the God-knowing career. I have revealed God as your Father in heaven. I have revealed you as the sons of God on earth. It is a fact that God loves you, his sons. By faith in my words, this fact becomes an eternal and living truth in your hearts. When by living faith you become divinely God-conscious, you are then born of the Spirit as children of light and life, even the eternal life wherewith you shall ascend the universe of universes and attain the experience of finding God the Father on paradise. I admonish you ever to remember that your mission among men is to proclaim the gospel of the kingdom, the reality of the fatherhood of God, and the truth of the sonship of man. Proclaim the whole truth of good news, not just a part of the saving gospel. Your message is not changed by my resurrection experience. Sonship with God by faith is still the saving truth of the gospel of the kingdom. You are to go forth preaching the love of God and the service of man. That which the world needs most to know is men are the sons of God, and through faith they can actually realize and daily experience this ennobling truth. My bestowal should help all men to know that they are the children of God, but such knowledge will not suffice if they fail personally to faith grasp the saving truth that they are the living spirit sons of the eternal Father. The gospel of the kingdom is concerned with the love of the Father and the service of his children on earth. Among yourselves here, you share the knowledge that I have risen from the dead, but that is not strange. I have the power to lay down my life and to take it up again. The Father gives such power to his paradise sons. You should be rather stirred in your hearts by the knowledge that the dead of an age entered upon the eternal ascent soon after I left Joseph's new tomb. I lived my life in the flesh to show how you can, through loving service, become God revealing to your fellow men, even as, by loving you and serving you, I have become God revealing to you. I have lived among you as the Son of Man, that you and all other men might know that you are all indeed the sons of God. Therefore, go you now into all the world, preaching this gospel of the kingdom of heaven to all men. Love all men as I have loved you. Serve your fellow mortals as I have served you. Freely you have received, freely give. Only tarry here in Jerusalem while I go to the Father, and until I send you the Spirit of truth. He shall lead you into the enlarged truth, and I will go with you into all the world. I am with you always, and my peace I leave with you. When the Master had spoken to them, he vanished from their sight. It was near daybreak before these believers dispersed. All night they remained together, earnestly discussing the Master's admonitions and contemplating all that had befallen them. James, Zebedee, and others of the apostles also told them of their experiences with the Master in Galilee, and recited how he had 3 times appeared to them. The Spirit of Truth. And now that he has personally left the world, he sends in his place this Spirit of Truth, who is designed to live in man, and for each new generation to restate the Jesus message, so that every new group of mortals to appear upon the face of the earth shall have a new and up-to-date version of the gospel, just such personal enlightenment and group guidance as will prove to be an effective solvent for man's ever new and varied spiritual difficulties. The first mission of this Spirit is, of course, to foster and personalize truth, for it is the comprehension of truth that constitutes the highest form of human liberty. Next, it is the purpose of this Spirit to destroy the believer's feeling of orphanhood. Jesus having been among men, all believers would experience a sense of loneliness had not the Spirit of truth come to dwell in men's hearts. This bestowal of the Son's Spirit effectively prepared all normal men's minds for the subsequent universal bestowal of the Father's Spirit, the adjuster, upon all mankind. In a certain sense, this Spirit of truth is the Spirit of both the universal Father and the Creator Son. Do not make the mistake of expecting to become strongly intellectually conscious of the outpoured Spirit of truth. The Spirit never creates a consciousness of Himself, only a consciousness of the Son. From the beginning, Jesus taught that the Spirit would not speak of Himself. The proof thereof of your fellowship with the Spirit of truth is not to be found in your consciousness of this Spirit, but rather in your experience of enhanced fellowship with Jesus, the Creator Son. The Spirit also came to help men recall and understand the words of the Master, as well as to illuminate and reinterpret His life on earth. Next, the Spirit of truth came to help the believer to witness to the realities of Jesus' teachings and His life as He lived it in the flesh, and as He now again lives it anew and afresh in the individual believer of each passing generation of the Spirit-filled sons of God. Thus it appears that the Spirit of truth comes really to lead all believers into all truth, into the expanding knowledge of the experience of the living and growing spiritual consciousness of the reality of eternal and ascending sonship with God. Jesus is the spiritual lens in human likeness which makes visible to the material creature Him who is invisible. He is your elder brother who in the flesh makes known to you a being of infinite attributes, whom not even the celestial hosts can presume fully to understand. But all of this must consist in the personal experience of the individual believer. The gospel of the kingdom is the fact of the fatherhood of God, coupled with the resultant truth of the sonship, brotherhood of men. The gospel is most certainly good news, for it is the Father and Son's plan of happiness for all their sons and daughters on this earth. Since the bestowal of the Spirit of truth, man is subject to the teachings and guidance of 7 higher spirit influences from the Father, Son, and Spirit. And so did the bestowal of the Spirit of truth bring to the world and its peoples the last of the Spirit endowment designed to aid in the ascending search for God. We can even request to have the mind of Jesus, and it will serve us well. If we are lacking in faith, we are told that through the appropriation of the faith of Jesus, mortal man can foretaste in time the realities of eternity. And sincere lovers of truth can always follow the admonition of Jesus' brother James, where he wrote in his epistle, "If any of you lack wisdom, let him ask of God, that giveth to all men liberally, and upbraideth not, and it shall be given him." Yes, the law of the universe is ask, and you will receive. Jesus is the new and living way whereby man can come into the divine inheritance which the Father has decreed shall be his for the asking. And our celestial advisors announce to us, there is a great and glorious purpose in the march of the universes through space. All of your mortal strugglings is not in vain. We are all part of an immense plan, a gigantic enterprise, and it is the vastness of the undertaking that renders it impossible to see very much of it at any one time and during any one life. We are all a part of an eternal project which the gods are supervising and outworking. The whole marvelous and universal mechanism moves on majestically through space to the music of the meter of the infinite thought and the eternal purpose of the first great source and center. There is in the mind of God a plan which embraces every creature of all his vast domains, and this plan is an eternal purpose of boundless opportunity, unlimited progress, and endless life. And the infinite treasures of such a matchless career are yours for the striving. The goal of eternity is ahead. The adventure of divinity attainment lies before you. Certain victory will crown the efforts of every human being who will run the race of faith and trust, depending every step of the way on the leading of the indwelling adjuster, the Father Spirit, and on the guidance of that good Spirit of the universe Son, the Spirit of truth, which so freely has been poured out upon all their mortal sons and daughters on earth. This has been a glimpse into the bestowal life of Jesus on our earth, his Revelation Symphony.